start off, we'll need a magic circle. To make a magic circle, wrap the yarn around 2 of your fingers and grab your hook and go under and over and pull that piece of yarn through, but do not tighten it. Leave the tail end long for the ears, and then chain 1, and we're going to single crochet 6 into the circle. To single crochet, insert your hook, pull up a loop, yarn over, and pull through the 2 loops on your hook. And we'll do this 5 more times. After 6 single crochets, tighten the circle by pulling on the loose end. Then we will slip stitch into the very first single crochet that we made in this round. To slip stitch, insert your hook under the V of the first single crochet. Yarn over and pull through, and then pull through again. When you make the slip stitch, make sure to pull it tight so the seam is less visible. For round 2, we're going to chain 1 and increase in every single stitch all around. So this means that we will put 2 single crochets in each of the 6 stitches, which will result in 12 total stitches. The first 2 single crochets should be put into the same stitch that you slip stitched into. At the end of this round, slip stitch and chain 1. Most of this pattern will be worked in rounds, so at the end of every round, slip stitch and then chain 1. Round 3 will be 1 single crochet and then an increase all around. So it will start off with 1 single crochet in the first stitch, and then 2 single crochet in the second stitch, and just repeat this pattern all around. At the end of this round, you should have 18 total stitches. Round 4 will be 2 single crochets and then an increase. So it will go 1 single crochet in the first stitch, and then 1 single crochet in the second stitch, and then 2 single crochet in the third stitch. At the end of this round, there should be 24 total stitches. For the next 4 rounds, 5 to 8, we will single crochet 1 into every single stitch. So there will be a total of 24 single crochets for 4 rounds. So I've just finished single crocheting once into every single stitch for 4 total rounds, and your head should start to look something like this. Now we can start decreasing. For round 9, we will single crochet twice and then decrease. The first stitch will have 1 single crochet, the second stitch will have 1 single crochet, and then the third and fourth will be a decrease. To decrease, insert your hook and pull up a loop, and then insert your hook into the next stitch and pull up another loop. You should have 3 loops and then pull through all 3 of them. This round will end with 18 total stitches. For round 10, it is 1 single crochet and then a decrease. The first stitch will be 1 single crochet, and the second and third will be a decrease. You should end with a total of 12 stitches. When you cut it, make sure to leave it long enough to sew the head onto the body. I did stuff it with polyfill, but you might want to hold off on that so we can work on the ears and the eyes. And now I'm just going to chain one and pull it through to make sure that there is a knot. Now we're going to work on the sweater from the neck down. To start the sweater, make a slip knot. So wrap the yarn around 2 of your fingers, go under and over, but this time pull it tight. And now I'm going to chain 25. So this number doesn't really matter, just make sure that it will fit around the bottom of the head. So if you're using a thicker yarn than I am, then you might want to chain less. So I've just finished 25 chains and it should fit around the bottom of the head like this. And now I'm going to slip stitch into the very first chain to form a loop so we can work in the rounds. For this very first round, just do 1 single crochet in each chain. The very first single crochet should be in the same chain that you slip stitched into. Since we're working in rounds again, slip stitch at the end of each round and chain 1. And for the next round, we'll do the exact same thing. And for the third row, we're going to work in the front loop only. A V has 2 lines, so instead of going under both lines of the V, you'll only go under the first one. And just do 1 single crochet into every stitch in the front loop only. Now we're going to start working on the arms. So what I've made so far is the collar, and the head should be able to fit right on top. We're going to work in 3 different rounds, 2 on either ends for the arms, and 1 in the middle for the body. To start the arm, I'm going to chain 1. With the collar folded in half, I'm going to single crochet about 1/4 across. I single crocheted 3 across. This will be the width of the arm, and the size can be adjusted by adding more or less single crochets. And to make the arm its own round, I'm going to turn the collar and start single crocheting back, forming a separate round. And this is where the armhole will be. I'm just going to work in rounds with 1 single crochet in every stitch for 8 rounds. The length of the arms is entirely up to you. Just make sure to note down how many rows that you make so you can replicate it onto the other side. Otherwise, you can count the rows after you've finished. So 8 rounds of 1 single crochet in every stitch, and I'll get back to you when I'm done. Just a quick tip, if you turn the arm while working, you can squeeze it and it'll be a little easier to get underneath the stitches. I've just finished the arm, so now I'm going to start on the mittens. And before I slip stitch my last round, I'm going to insert my hook, and instead of pulling through the green yarn, I'm going to pull through the dark brown colored yarn. Then I'm going to cut the green yarn. With the dark brown yarn, I'm going to do 1 round of 1 single crochet in every stitch. When you attach your yarn like this, always do your first single crochet in that stitch that you attached your yarn to. If you don't want the loose ends in your way, you can tie the green and brown strings together. And pull them through the sleeve. In this project, there are a lot of loose ends, but we can just tuck them into the body instead of having to weave them in. Before I slip stitch, I'm going to grab my light brown yarn and switch to using that next. With my light brown yarn, I did decrease. I did one single crochet and then a decrease, and then another single crochet and then another decrease. But the decreases aren't very noticeable, and it's a lot easier if you don't decrease. So that's another option if you'd rather do that. And before I slip stitch again, I'm going to switch to my white yarn. And there are so many loose ends, but you just have to pull them through the arm. And with the white yarn, I'm just going to do one single crochet in every stitch around. And the stitches are really small and close together, so if you can't slip stitch this last round, then that's okay. You can just cut off a long enough string and sew it closed by weaving in and out the front loop only for each of the stitches around. For this part, you can use either a yarn needle or just your crochet hook. And when you pull the string, it should close off the top of the mitten. To make the thumb parts of the mittens, I'm going to insert my hook into the place where the thumb would be and then poke it out through the tip so I can grab the white yarn. And then I'm going to pull it through to the other side. Then just make a few knots until they're the size you want them to be. Then insert your hook through the arm and poke it out through the thumb and grab that piece of yarn. And then pull it into the body. So I've just finished one arm, and now I'm going to attach the green yarn onto the opposite side to start on the other arm. To attach your yarn to a stitch, go under the stitch, pull the yarn through, and then double knot it, and later you can tuck in the string into the body. To start crocheting, insert your hook back under that stitch and pull up a loop, and then chain one and start your single crochets. To work the second arm, I'm going to do the same exact thing I did earlier. just crochet 3 single crochets on one side and then turn the piece and work 3 single crochets onto the other side. Here are the arms finished, and we can start working on the rest of the jacket. To start the middle round, attach your yarn. I chose to do mine on the side so that the seam would be less visible. So I'm just going to double knot it like I did before and pull up a loop and chain 1. I'm just going to be working 1 single crochet in every stitch for the rest of the jacket. Here I did 10 rounds, but again, you can do more or less if you want. I've just finished 10 rows on the jacket, and I'm going to add 1 more row with front loops only. This is so I can crochet the pants on the inside to make it look like the jacket is going over the pants. This is optional though, you can just crochet it normally and you don't have to worry about the front loops only. I finished the jacket, so now I can just slip stitch, chain 1, cut off my yarn, and pull it through. Since I did my last round in front loops only, you can see the back loops here, and that is where I will be crocheting my pants onto. So grab your black yarn and attach it to one of the loops. To make the pants, we'll be working in 2 different rounds. So create a round with your black yarn using single crochets and taking up half of the space underneath the jacket. I did 3 single crochets and then I turned the piece and did 3 more, and then slip stitch to complete the round. Then I did 7 more rounds for a total of 8 rounds. Before slip stitching my last round in black, I attached my dark brown yarn to start the shoes. And just so the loose ends were out of the way, I tied them together and pulled them through the pants. So I've already done the first shoe, but the explanation wasn't sufficient, so I'll just explain the second shoe. For the front of the pant legs, I crocheted the shoes on in the front loops only. And in the back, I did back loops only. This will cause the shoes to sort of slant and point out like shoes would. Since I had 6 single crochets, I divided it up in half. So 3 were done in front loops only and the other 3 were in the back loops. I start with back loops only because I'm working on the back of the shoes. But then I move on to front loops only as I turn to the front. And now just slip stitch and work 2 more rounds regularly. And by regularly, I mean under both loops and just 1 in every single stitch. And here I've just finished 3 total rounds for my shoes, and I'm going to cut off the yarn and weave the ends around the outside of the stitches to close the tip of the shoe off. And then you can tighten the hole and pull the yarn through the body. If you have any loose ends, just pull them in to hide them. And the body is done, so if you want to stuff it with anything, then now is the time to do it. And now it is time to work on the head. Since there is a visible seam right here, I will make the front on the opposite side so that the hair can cover the seam. I'm going to place the ears on either side of the head about halfway down. Using the extra yarn from the magic circle in the very beginning, I'll pull it through to the other side where the ear will be and tie a few knots, the same thing we did with the mittens. When it is a good size, I will insert my hook into the other side where the ear will be and then poke it through where the ear we've just made is, and then pull that yarn through to the other side and then make the second ear. When you're done, just pull the yarn back into the head. Now to make the hair, I'm going to use some white yarn, but you can use polyfill or cotton or anything else. So I will be attaching the hair around one of the rounds that we made on his head. So I'll start by poking my hook through the inside of his head and out, and grabbing a piece of white yarn. Now I'll just make a couple knots so it can't get pulled through. And then I'll just cut it short. To make it a little more realistic, I'm going to comb through the strands of the yarn. And I'll just repeat this process around his head. So I've just put in a strand of hair for every stitch on the back half in between rounds 3 and 4. Feel free to add in as much or as little hair as you want. Now we will be working with some black yarn to make the eyes. I used the ears to guide where I wanted to place the eyes so that they would be even. After I poke through the eye, I'm going to grab a piece of black yarn from the bottom of the neck. And for the eyes, I'm just going to be using some knots, but you can use safety eyes instead. This is just a good alternative if those are not available. And then I'll pull the tail end back through the head and use that to make the next eye. And I've just done the same thing to the other eye. And make sure to tie any knots to secure any loose ends. And I'm just going to flatten his hair. And you can use glue or more string to try to keep it flat, but I kind of like that you can style it. The next thing to do is to make the mask. First, we'll need a slip knot. Then chain 6. Single crochet into the second chain from the hook and across the rest of the chains. When you get to the end, chain 1 and turn. And continue single crocheting under the stitches for the second row, and then chain 1 and turn and complete another row. And I've just finished 3 rows of single crochets, and it should fit onto Bernie's face pretty well. And I'm going to chain 1 and cut off my yarn and pull it through. To attach the mask to the face, I inserted my hook from the inside of the head and poked it out at the very bottom in line with the eye. Then I just pulled through one of the tail ends from the mask. When the blue loose ends are well hidden, cut 2 roughly 5-inch strips of white yarn. When you pull the yarn to the inside of the head, make a knot. And then pull on the other side until the knot is up against the inside of the head. And then you can wrap it around his ear and do the same on the other side. I had a hard time tying a knot here, so I just tied it with the blue loose end that I had in there earlier. And the left side is done, so just do the same thing to the right side. And that's all for the head for now. Don't forget to stuff the head and the body first before you sew them on. For this part, I'm going to use a yarn needle, but if you don't have one, you can use your crochet hook. And to sew on the head, I'm just going to use the yarn that I left, and I'm just going to string it on the loops that I left out from when I crocheted in the front loops only when doing the collar. So just weave in and out and make sure to pull it tight so the head isn't loose. Once I've finished sewing on the head, I'm going to tie it with a knot. And then just string it through the body. And this part is optional, but if you want to make his arms folded and legs crossed, then you could just grab another piece of yarn or string. I use some crochet thread and just string it through. And tie a knot. And then string that through the body to hide it. Then I did the same thing for the legs. And the very last thing to do is to give him glasses. And I'm using some florist wire. If you don't have any, you could just use some thread or even yarn. And you can loop them around to make little circles or make them a little more rectangular. I also wrapped them around the ears to make sure they wouldn't fall off. And that is all for today. Please leave a like if you enjoyed and subscribe if you're new. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.